I had no idea that I had no desire to become a writer or author or anything like that. Um, but someone told me, and I say so in my blog. I have it on my blog. I had a crush on this guy,
Hmm.
and he he asked me how would our first date would be. So instead of telling him, I wrote it in a story form. So and via text. So whenever I text him like bits and pieces of the story, he would say, you should write a book. And I'm like, oh, okay. Well, I mean, somebody thinks my writing is great, so so that's a good thing. But I had nothing. But I'm like, okay, people like my writing, but what should I write about? So one day I'm in my friend's apartment just hanging out, and a name just popped into my head, and then suddenly her backstory came popping into to my head, then the storyline, then it branched out to another character, and then another, and then another, and then another. And lo and behold, my first book, Chalice, the Book of Life, was born.
Yeah, you got a couple of books that are written and everything. Now, for those that are not familiar with Chalice, the Book of Life, tell us a little bit without getting too much into the details because we want them to buy the book, but a little bit about what the storyline is.
Okay, well, Chalice, the Book of Life is the first book of a trilogy called the Chalice Trilogy.
Okay.
And this book has multiple storylines happening all at once, but it's easy to follow. It's broken down into four parts. Each chapter is broken down into four parts. So you have um, you have a story. I mean, okay, it falls under the umbrella of Christianity, but
Right.
you have drug abuse, you have child abuse, you have LGBTQ, you have what else do you have? You have arranged marriages, and unplanned pregnancy. So you have
Mm.
all those going on in that book, and I include all races of all people from all walks of life.
Right.
You have an Asian, you have the Braganza family. They're Asian. They're from India. The Montagues, the Grants, the Newkirks. They own a bar in what is considered the Rainbow Quarter.
Hmm.
That's the LGBTQ part of the city. So it's yeah. So I try to include everybody in it.
How was the book received? Because I know that it has some spiritual kind of things, and of course, you tried to incorporate some of the spiritual aspects as well as some of your own thoughts in that regard. So, how was it received in your own church community? Because you're definitely dealing with some very touching issues, whether that's death, whether that's dying, whether that's the LGBT rights, or a number of other things. So, how has it been received in your own community?
Um, well, uh, well, first of all, I was born Catholic and I was raised Catholic. I went to Catholic school from the age of 6 to 18 years old.
Hmm.
So I know the so I've been in the church for quite a while. Um, I you know I spoke I told my boyfriend about it, and he's a God fearing man. So the thing is, we all know that Christianity and the LGBTQ don't mix
Mm.
in no way, shape, or form. We know that, but at the same time, it's it I just want to broaden people's minds about that, because even though these are people from that are LGBTQ, they do believe in God.
Right.
So unfortunately, Christians believe that LGBTQ is like no, they do not they should not be in the church, and that's where I put in my book. There's one character that dies, and his estranged wife does not want anyone from the Rainbow Quarter to attend the funeral because they are LGBTQ.
Well.
She's a homophobe.
Right.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
I put that in there. I put that in there.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like you're definitely covering some real life and some real life situations. Actually, even though I did not, not really that much of a person that goes to church on a regular basis, but I do have a somewhat of a home church, which is my mom and aunt's home church up there in Holliston, North Carolina. But I do know a little bit about the Catholic religion since I went to a Catholic university, since I went to Marquette, and there, if you go to some of these universities and it's a Jesuit school, you're almost required to have two minors in my mind because you get the minor that you already have, and then you're required to have a certain amount of theology and philosophy courses. So you might as well consider theology a minor as well. Because I forget what the breakdown was. It might have been 12 theology and 9 hours of philosophy, or vice versa. But either way, it was about 21 hours of religious thought that was coming your way. Now, the fortunate thing is that we had different types of ministers because I had some that were very conservative and definitely, kind of fall into the C.S. Lewis mind of Catholicism and everything. And then there were some that were much more liberal and more into liberation theology. So I definitely got to hear different viewpoints, but I would argue that I have a minor in theology slash philosophy, even though it's not an official minor, but it's part of what they require. And I know that other universities associated with the Catholic Church have similar kind of things, whether that's Loyola or whether that's Xavier. Yeah, I know Xavier is connected to the Jesuits, if I remember it correctly, or the school that I went to, which was Marquette.
Yeah, yeah.
So definitely good. You're actually in, if I remember correctly, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but you're actually in the city itself. Because where are you living at right now? Because I know we met through the wonders of some of these lovely apps that are going on and everything. But which city are you in?
I am in New York City.
That's what I thought, and that's what I was curious about because my friend Nick, he's actually one of the co-owners here. Just came back from his first trip after the pandemic because one of the co-owners of the network is here in North Carolina. I think he lives maybe in Raleigh, if not Durham proper, but I know that they both of the owners live here. But he went up to New York because they were actually shopping a show up there in New York, and he was amazed at how quiet New York is. So even though we're 16 months in,
What?
well, yeah, he was noticing that the part of New York he saw was still quiet. Maybe not as quiet as the beginning of the pandemic, but he was seeing that it wasn't as much traffic. He was able to get to a restaurant. He was able to walk across the street. But your what is giving me the impression that at least in your borough, it's becoming more hustle and bustle. So are you seeing more people hustling and bustling, or is it still like a lot of empty spaces? Because he was also describing a lot of empty spaces in terms of folks not being in their office, probably working from home, or in some cases have even moved away from New York. So what was your view of how New York is recovering?
Well, it's recovering slowly but surely. Um, yeah, during the pandemic, people were dropping like flies, and it was a ghost town. It was like whoa, and it's especially Times Square. We all know Times Square is the most crowded, busiest part in the city, and and even there was a ghost town. So slowly but surely, people are getting back into the swing of things. In fact, well, there was a flood. We had a huge flood going on in the city, and it was in like crazy. There were certain train stations that were flooded, like water was coming through the train and coming down the steps and flooding the tracks, and it was,
Wow.
yeah, it was bad.
It sounds bad. Now, I'm imagining that you were probably a youngster when it took place and everything. But the other thing that Nick was fascinated by, and I know that some of our other people will be talking about it, was, of course, New York was in the news, some many years ago, back in 9/11 in 2001, and we're now in 2021 and everything. But I'm imagining that if you were around, you were a baby at that time and everything. But how are things going in terms of people's memories of that tragic day, and how are people feeling about people coming back? Because we've been in Afghanistan and that whole area for what seems like forever. And I'm sure even in your own peer group, you've probably had folks that have served in the military and even served over the Middle East.
hmm Well, there are some people who are still affected by it, um, and it's like when you it's like having PTSD. It is PTSD. Um, there are some people who don't talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I try not to talk about it because it was just so devastating. you know.
Right.
Um,
No,
not
I
to
can.
say, not to say that I don't feel comfortable talking about it now, but it's like, you know, well, at the time it was hard to talk about because it was so fresh. But now it's like, we're recovering. Um, it sucks that it happened, but we're able to get up from it. We're getting up from, we're recovering, and it's something we that's going to be edged in our psyche forever, and hopefully it brings us together as in solidarity, as
Yeah,
as a as a, as a city as a whole.
no, I definitely agree. I hope that it brings the world together. You know, a lot of times they say that disasters, even like COVID, is supposed to have brought us together and closer together. But then, unfortunately, sometimes after that together period happens, then we go back into our own separate ways, into our own cocoons, and all of that. Coming back to the
Mhm.
book, did you decide that you wanted to write? I know you said you were not an author and you were not really thinking of being an author when you were a youngster and everything. But when you decided to become an author, did you decide to go the independent route? Or did you try to go the more published route? And which route do you think is better for folks who want to be authors? And why was it better the route that you chose for your own situation?
Well, I chose the independent route. Well, at the time, I was just writing this book, writing this book, writing this book, and I'm thinking, okay, I'm writing this book. How am I going to get it published? So, someone told me, well, why don't you go to Amazon Bookshelf, KDP.com? That
Mhm.
way, well, before that, it was called Create Space. So they said, well, why don't you go on Create Space, send your transcript there, and they can put the book together, and that way you'll have your book to sell. So I'm like, oh, okay, I can do that. And that's what I did. And yes, I do suggest people, if you want to have your book made, if you want to have it published, I suggest you construct the book yourself. You have that creative freedom to do so. That instead of paying somebody to do all the publishing and whatnot, and because you never know, some of these publishers can charge you an arm and a leg, and they can just strip your whole work together, and then you'd be like, well, what is this? This isn't my work. Like, what did you do to my work? Like, I worked hard on this. So if you want to work on your stuff, I suggest you do it on your own.
I definitely agree. I think that sometimes doing it on your own is the best way to do it and everything. When you were writing, was there any writers that inspired you that you tried to emulate? Like I know some writers want to be like the next Maya Angelou. Some writers want to be like the next, some of the more traditional writers like Ernest Hemingway or people like that. But was there anybody that really you were really moved by and that you wanted to be similar to?
Well, I do have my favorites. Yes, Maya Angelou is definitely one of them, as well as Toni Morrison and James Baldwin. Speaking of which, and I only told a few people this, but I had a dream about James Baldwin
Oh wow!
that I did, and and um and it was so vivid. Like, we were sitting at a sidewalk cafe in Harlem, of course, and we were just talking and laughing and shooting the breeze, and he just looked he was so charming and so intellectual. It was just like, I was just enamored by him. I was just like, wow, James Baldwin. And I could remember what he was wearing, and he was just so it was like, it was amazing. I wish it was real, but it was a
Right.
dream. But I knew then, it was like, you are meant to be a writer, because if James Baldwin came to you in a dream, yeah, you meant to be a writer.
I hear you. I know that early on one of the other shows that I do, I was talking about the fact that today, and literally today, is the 30th anniversary of Boys in the Hood, and of course that deals with police relations with our community, but it also deals with gentrification. And of course, there's been a lot of gentrification in Harlem, and you dreamt about James Baldwin, and part of his life he actually spent away from the country because of some of that gentrification. But I was just wondering,
Yeah.
within your thoughts and your own reading of James Baldwin and what you see of your city now, what do you think James Baldwin would, one, think about Black Lives Matter and the kind of struggles that were going on with the police, and two, what do you think he would think about gentrification and where we are in regards to that? Because I know many years ago, because I'm in my late 50s and everything, I had to write a essay about Martin Luther King and what he would be doing now. So I was writing it in '79, several years, almost a decade or so after he had died. And I was saying how a lot of the things that he was fighting for were still being fought for at that time that I was writing. And I was in high school at that time. I could argue the same thing some 40 years later, that a lot of things that he fought for in the late 60s haven't gone that much further than we would have liked them to have gone. But I was just wondering what you think maybe MLK or Baldwin would think about the world, and particularly the world that we live in the minority space in 2021.
Well, I think that they would. I think to I think they would. I think if they would see that the world. Well, segregation does not exist anymore, and neither does well segregation and racism. They're just camouflaged a different way. It's not as open as it was during the 1950s and the 1960s.
Right.
See the it's more camouflage now. Like it's like you have affirmative action. Like I think that's so stupid. Like I don't think they would agree with affirmative action.
Gotcha.
I really don't. They wouldn't agree with that. They're saying, so you saying that this African American got the job because they were African American? Forget their credentials. Forget the fact that they got a 4.0 in high school and their SAT scores are through the roof and they've been on a dean's list. No, you wanna hire this person because you want to fill in a certain quota. No, they wouldn't be cool with that. They wouldn't be cool with that. Um, Another thing is they would have definitely they would have like at the way a lot of Black people lost their lives last year.
Mm-hmm.
It's because of police brutality. Then they I just think they would have been very disappointed in how the world is. I really do. They would have been very disappointed. I'm disappointed because Dr. King gone to jail, and try, just to bring peace into the world. James Baldwin, um, you know, James Baldwin wanted to bring some kind of light, some kind of like he wanted to see. I guess he wanted white people to understand. Look, this is what we're going through, and yeah, it yeah.
No, I definitely.
I know that for me, I look around my neighborhood and see, like I said, I live in Spanish Harlem, and
Mhm.
I see the gentrification, it's disappointing. Like I'm like considering leaving. I'm considering leaving New York myself because it's just not New York anymore. My neighborhood is not my neighborhood anymore. And it was predominantly Puerto Rican.
Mhm.
It ain't Puerto Rican anymore. So I'm like, I can't. But it's to me, it's just a very disappointing thing. I think they would have been disappointed on how the
Yeah.
world is going.
Yeah, definitely. They probably would have been disappointed, but they might have been encouraged. I don't know what your thoughts are, and if you want to share them, I'd love to hear them. But a lot of activists has come out of the young generation, and definitely a lot of folks are fans of Alexandria Ortega Cortez. I know others that aren't, including some of those that are in New York and everything. But I don't know what your thoughts are about her leadership, but it definitely sounds like at least there are some young leaders that are out there. But I was just wondering your thoughts on her as a leader and even the whole thoughts of the squad and everything. And also, if you have any thoughts about Puerto Rican statehood, because I had forgotten that you were of Puerto Rican descent, but I do know that there are a lot of folks that are still trying to hope that Puerto Rico will either have statehood or be a separate country, because I've heard both arguments and both sides.
I firmly believe Puerto Rico. people should leave Puerto Rico alone. Just leave them alone, because they had I mean, they were fine where they are. They had their own anthem, they had their own flag, they had their own teachings, they had they were good where they were. They had their own culture. It is not right that United States would try to make them a commonwealth. Okay,
Right.
you want just leave them alone. I mean, you've already taken Hawaii and Alaska. Leave Puerto Rico alone, because they're fine where they are. And you've all and see, in the past they've all the Puerto Ricans have already been used as guinea pigs for birth control back in the
Mhm.
1950s and 60s. And now you want to turn them into another state? No, leave them alone. Just leave them alone. It's not right.
Yes.
It's not right. And it's just another form of colonization. It's just another form of colonization. So just, they should just be their own they should be their own country.
No, I definitely agree with you on that and everything. How are you feeling about the way the election turned out? Because I know a lot of folks were trying to figure out about your elections, and I think the gentleman that was, I guess he's considered more of a moderate and everything, is the one that has won. I think he actually was meeting with President Biden earlier today and everything. But I was just wondering your thoughts about the way that the politics are going there now, both in terms of the mayoral race and also in terms of the uh, people that you have represented you in the Senate and everything.
Well, I will say this. I'm glad Trump is out of office.
Right.
um, at the same time, um, you know, President Biden has cleaned up and has made things better, but I still have my reservations. And there's always and see, because Trump did not get impeached, and therefore he can always he can always run again. That's like, if it feels like that dark cloud is hovering for me. I feel like that there's that Trump is that dark cloud, and when Biden's 4 years is up, he's going to try and get and run again. And it's I try to be very optimistic, and think and focus on now, because President Biden is
Right.
doing a good job. He's cleaning up all the nonsense Trump did and all that stuff. But it's I have my reservations. I have my
No,
reservations.
I understand it. No, I understand. And getting off the political stuff and everything, I was reading about your imagination, and apparently you had this imagination all your life. I'm actually one of those people that can imagine some stories, and have even been on cruises where I've made up entire stories and everything. But I was just wondering, at one point, do you feel that you discovered this vivid imagination of yours, and were you the child that was in the neighborhood always making up great stories and doing maybe even plays and making up things with your friends? I know that part of it you said was based on dating life and dating situations, but just as a child and as a young person, were you always showing your imagination? And at what point did you know you had this vivid imagination?
I've had this vivid imagination ever since I was a little girl.
Okay.
Ever since I was a little girl. Um, Usually, I mean, I I was at that time, I was the only child, so I was usually by myself. And as for my friends, um, I hardly went out. I hardly played with my friends. Whenever I went and played with my friends, is when I was out with my mother, and we would go to my grandmother's house, which was 2 blocks away from my house. And
Mm.
that was the only time I got to play with my friends, if she allowed me to. I was very sheltered. So, I've always had a vivid imagination. And as for as for sharing my imagination with my friends, I was afraid, because I didn't want them to think I was weird. They already thought I was weird. And I just wasn't like every other. I guess I just wasn't like every other child.
Right.
I was very different, you know. So, and
Well,
I think
that's a,
at the time I thought there was something wrong with me, because I wasn't like everybody else, you know. So that so
One of the other things you said, which I was glad to hear from and everything, but because I know one of the things that our network talks about and a couple of the founders talk about is the education system, because they feel that the education system isn't as good as it should be. They feel that we're using 18th century values, even though we're in the 21st century. And they would like us to teach more things about like financial literacy and even encourage the arts to use that to teach critical thinking and a lot of other things. But they do feel that we've gotten away from that and we're kind of like using 18th century values, even though we're in the 21st century. But one of the things that your bio talks about is that you had this English teacher that encouraged you. So, how important it was it for you to have this English teacher encourage you as a writer? And do you think that there's enough of that going on with the kids now? And I don't know if you have any kids or not. I know I'm the old man with no kids, but I'm wondering, are you feeling if there are enough? Well, I do have my two nephews, though. If there's enough encouragement in the school system of trying to encourage kids to exercise their creativity.
I feel like it's gotten away from from today's youth. I mean, yes, I have an 18-year-old son and a 12-year-old daughter. My
Okay.
12-year-old daughter takes after me. She loves to write, and she's very artistic. My son, however, he's more into sports, and that's fine, but at the same time, it's I those those children who want to express themselves creatively, there should be more, that outlet should be more stronger. There should be more for children who want to express themselves. Like, you can't just say to a kid, well, you're drawing now, but you'll grow out of it. Or, you like to play with this now, you like to play the drums now, but you'll grow out of it. You can't tell a child that. You can't. I mean, if it's embedded in them to do that, then by all means they should, by all means, the teachers and parents and anybody who's should encourage that. They should foster that, because it yeah, it helps them with their self-esteem, and it helps them with their creativity. I know that when with my English teacher, she pointed out something to me that I didn't know I had. Like, I had no idea I had this gift for language, and she was the one that pointed out to me. So that kind of gave me some kind of hope of, you know, maybe I do know how to write. Um, it, as for writing my book, I didn't get very much support from my family. I didn't, and that's okay. But
Well, that's one.
because I know that. Go ahead.
Yeah, that's one of the things I was going to ask you and everything, because I know one of the things that we talk about on this show, and I've had other creatives on, everybody from authors to musicians to a number of others, and we sometimes talk about. I have a friend of mine that talks about the dream stealers and the dream killers and the folks that don't want to encourage you and things of that nature. He also talks about those folks that will drain your brain because you might have skill sets and they might want to talk about the information that you have that is worthwhile to them and everything. But I know my friend Ray Pascal, who used to be a rental coordinator at the Carolina Theater, he oftentimes talks about dream stealers, and those are those folks that find a way to discourage you. And even my dad, who is a visual artist, will sometimes talk about that as well as people not getting paid for what they're worth. But I was just wondering your thoughts as a creative about those folks that don't want to encourage you when you were trying to write your book. They may not have even been trying to encourage you when you were doing your cooking and everything. And I want to get to a little bit about that as well. But
Mhm.
definitely, what are your thoughts about folks that are those dream killers, and how do you, even as a spiritual person or religious person, deal with them? Is there like a particular proverb or a particular thing within the Bible that you use to help you get through it, or is it a certain meditation or affirmation that you use? Because I know a lot of people also believe in affirmation. So I'm just wondering, how do you deal with those folks that are going to try to stop your dream?
Well, for a very long time, I was listening to these people simply because they were my family.
Right.
These were my parents, and being a child, you're 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 very impressionable. Like eh, you, they would tell me, they would tell me, why are you wasting your time with that? And do something else with you need to do something else with your life, more something more meaningful. And that would make me feel really bad because I really like doing it. I enjoy doing it. In fact, I didn't mention that I wanted to be a fashion designer, which I still do.
Right.
And I would sketch these designs. And I remember one time I showed my mother this, one of my designs, and she got offended over the fact that the model I drew was not plus size. I'm like, what? Like, I mean, she got really offended that the model I drew was not plus size. I'm like, this is a prototype. Like, and it's just a drawing. Like, what is, like, yeah, yeah. So it has gotten to the point where I disassociated all that negativity out of my life. I got to the point where I don't want any kind of negativity in my life. If you are for me, great. If you're against me, stay away from me. As for my spirituality, I do pray a lot. I try to read my Bible. Um, I know now that I am more in tune with God because I know God has me.
Right.
Whatever I do, if I have, my faith in God is so deep. I trust I trust in God. Like, if I feel I'm in doubt, I know God has me. I know God has me, and that's what keeps me going. Is that God wants me to do this. If God wants me to do this, I'm gonna keep doing this. He don't want me to quit. So
No, I agree.
that's
He
how I
definitely
feel.
wants you to keep doing it and definitely keep the thing going and everything. One of the other things I know you mentioned is the fact that you are a cook and very much involved in the cooking aspect as well. So I was just wondering if you could just share a little bit about when that became a thing for you, and also how it became a major thing for you as well. Because I'm always fascinated by folks that are in that cooking space, and I know that you've definitely mentioned being somebody that loves cooking and all of that. So I would love to hear a little bit about your cooking space before we get back to the book as well.
Sure. Okay, so my little company is called A Jar of Cookies, and it all started when I was working my 9 to 5, and I said, you know what? Let me do a little something something for my coworkers. So I baked some cookies, and within an hour or two, they were all gone. So I'm like, oh, okay, I must be doing something right. So I kept doing it and doing it and doing it. And it got to a point like, you know what? I need something to supplement my income. So that's when I started doing selling cookies. Um it expanded, like, as time passed, different flavors kept coming into my head, chocolate, like chocolate pretzel cookies and peanut butter pretzel cookies, and then uh bacon lovers cookies, and these brownie cookies I call brown bears, and then I had the gluten-free cookies, and then I had the diabetic friendly cookies. So it just grew and grew and grew and grew. And this is coming from somebody who was never taught how to cook. She was self-taught how to cook. And I love cooking. I love food. So yeah.
Sounds like you really do love that food and everything. So that is a great thing. You mentioned some unusual cookies like bacon cookies and a couple of other things. So, what is the most unusual cookie that you have created, and how did people react to it? Because I'm always fascinated when people come up with something that is not the norm, and it definitely sounds like this is something that would not be considered the norm when you've got somebody that's doing a bacon cookie, and there was something else you said. I was in there going like, that's different.
Yeah. Okay, well, I will say the bacon lovers cookies is a sugar cookie with bacon in it, with
Okay.
actual bacon, and I had it, and it's really good. It's a little bit of the salty with the sweet. It's chewy. It's really good. Now, I had somebody buy buy a dozen of my brown bear cookies. Those are brownie cookies, and he loves them. In fact, he wants me to bake him another dozen tomorrow, and that's what I'm gonna do.
Wow, that sounds like some really interesting cookies and everything. And where are you hoping to go with the cookies? Are they in the stores? Are they in area restaurants there and everything? Because we do have some folks that watch. I know my friend Leonardo has a Zimbabwean restaurant here in Durham, and he watches on occasion. Dorian Bolden has a coffee shop, and he watches on occasion. So we do have folks that are in that restaurant space. So I was wondering, how are you hoping to get out and share your story and everything and get the cookies out?
Right now I do it via social media. Um, if if someone lives locally, they could we I meet them at a particular spot, and I deliver the cookies like that. But I also deliver outside of the state. I have people who um who order cookies from Maryland and from Arizona and California. So I deliver throughout the entire country.
Sounds truly amazing. By the way, my friend Dino was watching. He's a motivational speaker and a stand-up comedian, so he was enjoying your conversation and enjoying your spirit and everything. And definitely, he comes out of some struggles as well, but he was definitely enjoying some of your comments and all of that. For those that
Thank
are
you.
writers and those that are wanting to be writers or wanting to be creatives in general, what words of advice would you give to them in order to encourage them to do what they need to do? Whether that's writing a book like you've done, whether that's performing a poetry, or whether that's doing music, or a number of other things, because you have so many interests, including being a fashion designer. So, what words of encouragement would you give to people that are in that creative space?
My words of wisdom is um always like I always center yourself with positive people. Always center yourself with encouraging people. If you are in doubt of yourself, you always look to the people who will lift you up. Um, those who are negative, who will say negative things about you, saying that you can't do that, um, and you're not being realistic, ignore them, because the fact of the matter is you're doing something dynamic and you're doing something that they wish they could do. They don't have balls to do. So you're doing something very dynamic, and you're going outside of the box. So don't be afraid to go outside the box. Secondly, go with your gut, and whatever you do, whatever you want to do it with passion. Do it from your heart, because whatever you do is going to come out in its purest form, and it's going to be beautiful. It's going to be awesome, and people are going to love you for it.
Now, Anja, you've written books of different styles. Like I said, you definitely have the trilogy, and I want to go dig deeper into the trilogy, which of course is very Christian based and everything. But you've also written books that deal with trauma and things of that nature, and what some people might call erotica. So, how do you balance that? Because, like I said, the two types of books are vastly different. So, I just wondered, how do you balance that, and also your thoughts about the Pink Foxhole, which is your other book that you have written as well.
Okay, so these books, the books that I write, they're a reflection of my personality. Like each like the trilogy represents me growing up in the city from as a child in the 80s, as a teenager in the 90s, and as a young adult in the early 2000s. That's one representation of me. The Pink Foxhole is a more of the sexual side of me. Okay. Now, in the Pink Foxhole, I want or both of my books or all of my books, I want the reader to feel all kinds of emotions. I want them to be happy. I want them to feel sad. I want them to feel empathy. I want them to feel um angry. I want them to feel all kinds of emotions. Now, with the Pink Foxhole, it's not just about that. Yes, it has strong sexual content, but there's also some sci-fi, and there's also some insight from of each story, because there's a collection of so the Pink Foxhole is a collection of seven short stories. And yes, I do include sexual trauma. Why? Because I feel society is still closed minded when it comes to dealing with a survivor of sexual trauma. You have like right now, um women as well as men are getting justice from these monsters who have terrorized them and have psychologically scarred them for 20, 30 plus years. You have Weinstein, you have Epstein, you have Kelly, you have Maxwell, and a host of other monsters who have preyed upon innocent lives and has scarred them forever. And yes, I do include two short stories that do deal with sexual trauma. And it's one. Okay, let me just explain one story. One story
Please.
deals with a woman who is um who is a child psychotherapist, and she is very good at her job. She is the her staff love her patients love her, even their parents love her. But this individual has unresolved child trauma of her own,
Mhm.
and she is faced with that trauma. She has to face that trauma. And what's so special, so special about these two stories is that this particular story about the psychotherapist, it was inspired by the Twilight Zone, Nightmare of a Child. I don't know if you remember the Twilight Zone,
I do
but
remember the
I
Twilight
love
Zone. Don't remember that episode.
okay, but I love the Twilight Zone. And yes, Nightmare of a Child was about a woman. She was a teacher and she sees this little girl, but until the very end, she realized that the little girl is her.
Wow.
Yeah, the little girl is it takes the form of her trauma. The trauma takes the form of her little girl, and she's faced to resolve this trauma that has been hovering over her life for years now. And it's the same thing with this psychotherapist. Her trauma is takes the form of her former self as a little girl, and now she has to face her trauma. So that's one story. The second story is about another little girl who has a stepfather who's been sexually abusing her. So one day her mother buys her this doll she's always wanted, and the doll becomes her best friend and her protector. Like she hones into this doll, even though it's a toy. But she looks to this doll like it's a confidant and like it's her best friend. So one night, while she's sleeping with this doll in her arms, her father comes in and does whatever to her. And come to find out, the doll is seeks avenges the little girl for being abused by her stepdad. And that story is inspired by another Twilight Zone episode called Living Doll.
Think I do remember that episode, if I remember it correctly and everything. I'm gonna have to introduce you to a good friend of mine, and I sometimes appear on her live streams, Nancy Burroughs, because she has this thing called it's about connection. I'm trying to remember the full title of her live stream that she does on Sundays, but I know it's got connection in the title. But she's a speech pathologist in LA, but she was a survivor, and she's very much open about being a survivor and all of that. So definitely is engaged in that conversation, and oftentimes is not afraid to let other people share what she went through and everything, just because she feels that it's something that you were just saying that we don't talk enough about in society. So she's very open about what she went through with a family member. I want to say it was her grandfather, but definitely a family member. And definitely she's very open about that conversation and very raw about that conversation as well. So it sounds like to me, you've definitely got some of that rawness as well.
I've come to the realization that I have these scars that I deal with silently, and I just can't do it anymore. I feel like it's time for me to speak, and I'm not afraid to speak anymore. Whether it's through my books, or whatever the case may be, I don't have to be afraid anymore.
Yeah, that makes a
So,
lot of sense, and definitely don't have to be afraid anymore. And sometimes the truth is what sets folks free, both in terms of our own reality as well as the reality of those that have put those harms on individuals as well. So definitely, it's good to have that kind of openness, and I'm definitely one to encourage it. I know that I've got friends that say that I have a very empathetic kind of personality, so I can definitely understand, even though I probably have not gone through those things myself. I can definitely understand, but we also know that abuse can be in different forms. It's not always physical, because I can't say that I haven't been emotionally abused or had some mental abuses, because those do happen, and sometimes you ladies are a master at it. Not always just the physical aspect as well, but definitely it's all various aspects of abuse that can take place and everything. So I'm just glad that folks are having very open conversations about these matters and being forthright about them and all of that. So definitely it sounds like you are using these powerful tools to share your truth as well. What got you into getting off the deep subject just for a second, but what got you into science fiction? Because I know a lot of people, have gotten more into science fiction when we saw Black Panther, before the pandemic and the whole Wakanda thing. But it sounds to me like you went into the Twilight Zone, probably a couple of the other ones that were out there, even way before people were doing that. And you might have been, like me, a Star Trek and a Star Wars kind of fan. But what got you into science fiction? And we were actually talking on the network earlier today about Sir Richard Branson and that flight into the space and everything. Now, I'm thinking that it's something that people like you and me can't afford, and I don't know that even your kids will be able to afford it by the time that they are around my age or my dad's age, and he just pushed above 80 and everything. So I'm thinking it's still going to
oh
be a
wow,
long time
I love
before
that.
it's affordable for the common person. But who knows? Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it'll be affordable for the common man in the next 10 to 20 years. But I'm still waiting for the
Yeah.
Jetson plane and the self-driving cars. So we don't have those available either. And I'm still waiting for those.
Yeah. Well, I think I've always been attracted to sci-fi. I think it started with Bewitched and I Dream of Jeannie.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's where it started. And then it just branched out to the Twilight Zone. Like I was just so fascinated into with the Twilight Zone because it was just so different. And I like the early version of the late 50s and early 60s version. I love that. And I also like the 80s version, but I haven't been able to catch the one with Jordan Peele. I've
Gotcha.
I've only I've only caught it I only caught one episode and I'm like, dang, I can't get CBS access because it's only on CBS access. I'm like, darn, I can't get that. But I enjoy watching the ones the original ones as well as the ones from the 80s. So it's I love it. But yeah.
Sounds like you definitely have an affinity for that kind of uh, portrayals of where things can go. But what is your thoughts if they came to you tomorrow and said, "Look, we got $1,000 flight to go up to space as opposed to the 250,000 that these rich folks are paying"? Would you be game for going on a trip into the space? Even though, from it's my understanding, all they did was cross into the edge of space, got to spend a few minutes in weightlessness, and then came back down. So that seems very expensive for what they did. But that's just my impression of what was pulled off and everything. But I was wondering what your thoughts are. I know that the other billionaires are going up into space in the next week or two, but Sir Richard Branson pulled off the first one and did it yesterday. So, if you had the opportunity, would you go up into space? And are you looking forward to space travel for the common man in the next 100 years or so?
Um I never gave it any thought, but to have a jetpack, that'd be kind of cool. But I never thought about going into outer space.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think the Jetsons jetpack, that would be the better version. Either the jetpack or the self-driving car or something that's a little bit more realistic. I think I can get with those. I'm not really trying to go, even though I'm not that far from Duke University. And there was a young lady that was going through the process about 3 or 4 years, it might have even been 5 years ago, of being a candidate to take that trip to Mars. And I'm going like, Mars is a kind of hot planet, so that seems to me like a
Yeah.
one-way destiny toward the end. Because I don't know that you're going to make it back and everything. I know that they say that they are working on ways that that can happen, but that just sounded a little bit too dangerous for my taste and everything. But then again, I'm not one to try to go skydiving either, because I did have a friend that tried to talk me into skydiving, and I'm like, nope, perfectly good with my feet right here on the ground and all of that. So I'm with you on that. I'm not sure that I wanted to try to do any of these overly adventuristic things in that regards and everything. But um, coming back to the first book, the trilogy and everything, how is the trilogy complete? And if so, how far? What are the titles of all of the trilogy books, or do you still have one more of the trilogy to go? So where are we at in the trilogy process?
Well, right now, I'm still working on I'm still working on the other two. I mean, I have already started, but I'm working on the second one. It's called Chalice, the Book of Love, and the third one is called Chalice, the Book of Forgiveness. So I will give you a little synopsis of the Book of Love. It's just like the Book of Life,
Uh-huh.
but in this case, it takes place in the 90s. The Book of Life takes place in the 80s, but the Book of Love takes place in the 90s. And some of the characters have gotten a little bit older, and the subject matter is has gotten a little bit more controversial because now you're dealing with sexual abuse and Stockholm syndrome. Um, you're also dealing with there's I mentioned the AIDS pandemic and the HIV and what else? There's still and the the well the trying to think. Oh, and there's forbidden love with an incestual underlining and a homosexual underlining, And so it's well, I'll tell you about one character. One character, his name is Kenner. And Kenner is biracial. His parents died when he was 7, and he was adopted by his rich uncle. His uncle happens to be a candy tycoon, and but his uncle is he ain't right in the head. Like he has these he's been sexually abusing his nephew, and but the nephew doesn't see him as his uncle. He doesn't know that's his uncle. He just sees him as his godfather, which he is. But the abuse is so deep that the little boy sees him and this monster having a deep relationship. And when this tycoon isn't spending that much time with him, it's like, he feels discarded like garbage. So this abuse really messes his head up. It really messes him up. And then he finally meets with a guy named Michael, and they spark up a relationship. But the uncle slash stepfather is not cool with that. But Kenner is really messed up. Like, he really messed up his nephew.
Wow, sounds fascinating. Do you have it like have you done any readings at your local library or any places like that, just in terms of getting the books out there? And do you have a book nearby you? And if so, can we get a passage from one of the books? We've got some great descriptions, but I know folks that are sometimes a little bit more direct in that they like to hear the words come from the author. But I know that that's putting you on the spot. So if you don't have it handy, I'll understand that as well.
All I can say is that you can find my books on Amazon. Um, if Before you purchase the book, there is a button where you can read uh a little bit of the story before you purchase it. It's available on hardback, paperback, as well as Kindle. Um, then and it's very and the cost is very reasonable. The the Book of Life on paperback is $11, and on
Okay.
Kindle is 4. Pink Foxhole paperbacks is $16 and Kindle is 8. So it's reasonable prices.
Yeah, that sounds like some very reasonable prices and everything. So it definitely sounds like very affordable and all of that. What are you doing in terms of pursuing the fashion end of what you would like to do? I know that Andre Leon Talley is originally from Durham, and like I said, that's where I'm at. And I know that there are some other fashion types that are here. As a matter of fact, I serve on the board with the Carolina Theater, and one of the young ladies that I serve on the board with is actually one of the editors for one of the popular magazines that covers fashion as well as a number of other things in that regards and everything. So I was just wondering, what are you doing in terms of trying to get the fashion side of your business covered?
Well, to be honest with you, it's been really hard as far as the fashion aspect is concerned because um I have all these designs, but it takes money for to get them done. And unfortunately, I don't have the money, and I've been, and people tell me to do grants and do this and do that, and I just don't have I just don't know the right people to go to help me get to where I want to be. So what I do is the jewelry. Granted that I love doing the jewelry, and it's and as for the jewelry, I do it via social media. So I'm still looking for the right resources to in the fashion industry.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And the magazine I was trying to remember that Katie worked for is Vanity Fair. I knew it was a magazine that had to do with the fashion industry and everything, but yes, she's had been working for them for years and has now moved down here to North Carolina. I want to say with her significant other and everything, but definitely she is serving on the board with me at the Carolina Theater and definitely is very much involved in that fashion side. So I'll have to tell her about you and hopefully she can be a connection as well because that magazine has been around forever, and she has definitely been involved with them as a audio editor, as a couple of other styles of editors as well. So she has definitely been in that space for a while and everything. So, like I said, we have become getting to know each other through our board serving at the same time. So definitely that's somebody that I know. And like I said, Andre Leon Talley originally went to Hillside, which is a high school from here. I think he might have gone to Central, but I don't remember if he actually graduated or not. But he definitely has some Durham roots, and there are others with Durham roots as well. And of course, I might know a couple of people there in New York and LA as well. So I'm always about trying to connect people and help them out in any way that I can. So that's one of the things that I try to do on a regular basis. So if I hear of anything, I will definitely let you know about it and definitely share that wisdom with you and everything. But tell us a little bit about the jewelry. You told us a little bit about the cooking. I'm sure folks are curious about the jewelry. And are you doing the festival circuit to get the jewelry out? Because I know a lot of times people will do the festival circuit in order to get their jewelry out. But I'm sure people would love to hear about how you are getting your jewelry out there in the Spanish Harlem area and what ways you're trying to get it out to the public.
Oh, absolutely. I'm doing my best to go to not all the festivals, but I try to go to some of the festivals because just renting a spot is very expensive because it's in a city, and people love to do that kind of shopping as well. And so for the most part, I do it online via social media. I did go to one, and I made a and I did very well. I did very, very well. So I'm very blessed on with that. Now, as for the jewelry, my brand is called Carlin and Davika Gems, and how I got that name is Carlin means little warrior, and
Hmm.
Davika means little goddess. And the reason why I chose those names because I'm only 5'3". So 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 that's why that's where the name comes from. Because I think I'm a warrior as well as a goddess, and even though I'm so small, um I design and make my own pieces, earrings, bracelets, anklets, necklaces. And I'm working on rings. I'm working on a particular ring, um, which nobody has, and I want to like trademark that. Um, I have three three collections. The first collection is called Chocolate Strawberries,
Hmm.
and it consists of not green, brown freshwater pearls with rose gold, rose colored pearls, um and and I can't pronounce it. It starts with an S. Swarovski crystals. I don't know if I'm saying it right, but those kind of crystals. So that's my chocolate strawberries collection. The second one is called Gunnar and Rosalia, and Gunnar and Rosalia is a personification of the metals I use. Gunnar would be the gunmetal, and Rosalia would be the rose gold.
Okay.
And I also use Swarovski crystals with that. And my final one is called Freedom Loves You, which is fly, and it's my that's my LGBTQ collection, and it was inspired by the show that made a huge impact on me called Pose. I don't know if you ever heard of Pose, but it's starring MJ Rodriguez,
Okay.
Dominique Dominique Jackson, and Angelica Ross, India Moore. Um, it made a huge impact on me that I had to make a collection for the LGBTQ community. That show made a huge impact on me. So those are my three collections in my little company, Carlin and Davika Gems.
And what has been your biggest drawback in terms of the company, and what can folks that are watching, and we do have a global audience, do to help the company get to its next level? Because I know that we've got Shaquille that watches sometimes and actually sometimes participates from Australia, and we've got people that watch from Malaysia, South Africa, and Brother Mike is out of Nigeria. So we do have a global audience, and some of these folks are um, in the finance area, because I know Shaquille used to be a hedge fund person, and then there are others that are in the performance or creative spaces. They come from all kinds of spaces and everything. But just if folks are listening, they're fascinated by your story, fascinated by what you're trying to accomplish. What are some of the things that you need the most in order to become successful on the next level?
Well, I pretty much need wow, there's so much that I need. I just need the right sponsor to help me go to the next level. Like right now, I think I consider myself to still be green. Um, I still have I have like a ton of merchandise that I want to sell, and like I said, it's hard to do it via like through the festival because that's so expensive, and so I do it from social media because it's like a broader audience. So I try to like get my pieces through Facebook and Instagram as much as I could, with my stories and with my feeds and stuff like that. So
Yeah, that makes a lot.
I just need to get hooked up with the right people.
No, it's all about connections and networking. I'm definitely a big proponent of networking, and I consider myself to be a major connector. Actually, Dino would tell you that I wrote the first story of him being a comedian back when he was doing that on a more regular basis and all of that. So definitely, I believe in being a connector and things along those lines. I actually just did an event Friday with another friend of mine because she's in the process of opening up a thrift store, but the thrift store will be geared toward those people that are having autism or fit within that spectrum and everything. So she's in the process of doing that store, and all of the employees, well, except for maybe management, but the majority of the employees will be in that spectrum. And of course, they will do some work to try to help them. And of course, them having regular jobs is a help in and of itself. So I know that she's got her company called Real Life Works, and we just did a fundraiser on Friday to raise money for that at a local uh, bar slash brewery and everything. So definitely few people were there, but those who were there were engaged, and hopefully they raised at least a little bit of money for the thrift store, and the thrift store can get launched before the end of the year. Because I know that right now she's working at a department store, and she said that she cannot put up with that but for so long. Because just like your dream is uh, the book going out further and a lot of other things going further, the thrift store is her dream, and she definitely would like to see it be a success and all of that. So definitely, I can relate, and I've seen people that have to have that push and that success. So I definitely will try to do what I can to help you get out there and to be
Thank
whatever
you
kind of
so much.
success we can do. Because definitely, I believe in supporting those people that are positive and all of that. And you definitely have a very positive kind of mindset and all of that. So, like I said, I will see what connections, because that's what I'm about more than the finances, but definitely have a wealth of connections. So I will try to see how those connections can play into helping you get out there and all of that. So hopefully that will at least serve some function and everything in that regards.
Great.
But
Awesome.
no problem at all. Glad to do it. Glad to help people out. I love to be very positive and to try to get them to help that they need. And I see a lot more people are using um, Clubhouse and LinkedIn and a number of other things to get their word out. So, which social media outlets do you feel have been the best for you in terms of getting your message out?
Well, Facebook and Instagram have been very good to me. Um, it depends. It just goes. I just it just depends on who has the same similar interests as me. I always connect with the ones that have the same interests as me, whether it's books or fashion or cooking. I connect with those people.
Now, that
So
makes a lot.
yeah.
That makes a lot of sense.
As
When
for
it comes to
I'm
the
sorry.
cooking, when it comes to the cooking, do you think that you're going to try to open at some point a restaurant? And you had also mentioned that you might want to leave Spanish Harlem. And if you were to leave Spanish Harlem, are there any parts of the world and our globe that you are looking towards moving towards? Because, like I said, you definitely said that you are have been frustrated by some of that gentrification that's going on there in New York and particularly Spanish Harlem. But is there any particular places that you think you and your family would like to move to? And do you hope to have your own restaurant one day?
I'm looking. I've been looking into South Carolina.
Um,
I have some family down in South Carolina.
okay.
Yeah. As for a store, um, I want to do it online first, and then maybe consider doing a brick and mortar.
Right.
But for now, I want to do online.
Yeah, I know a lot of people are doing online, and a lot of people are doing even before they got to the brick and mortar. I know some people that actually had a food truck that then led to the brick and mortar. Because I know that here in Durham, Only Burger was a food truck first, and I think Pie Pushers, which is a pizza place, Only Burger, you can tell what that is a burger one. But both of those, as well as I want to say maybe one of the Latin American ones, were food trucks first, and then they became physical stores. So I do know that some people are using the food truck food truck route in order to get their physical store also, and those were very popular. I won't say they were highly popular up there in the Northeast, like around New York, Philadelphia, and places like that. So I'm imagining that they might still be popular, even though with less traffic, maybe not as much so. So how is the restaurants business from what you're seeing doing in New York? Because you are a resident there, so you might have a better understanding than me. And have you been still seeing a lot of those food trucks out and about?
Well, I will say that some of the restaurants are coming out. They're slowly opening up. As for the food trucks, I see some of them, but if anything, I see the ice cream truck because it's the summertime.
Right. Yeah,
Yeah.
it is definitely hot there now. Even though it's the West Coast that's been in the heat wave, we've not exactly been not toasting here in North Carolina, and I'm sure that New York is still toasting. I remember the old image was of people doing things with the fire hydrants and basically opening them up in order to get that
Oh
summer relief.
yeah.
So I don't know if
Oh
that's still
yeah.
going on.
Us in some areas, yeah. In some areas, it's not like how it was back in the day, where somebody like turned on the fire hydrant and stuff like that. But yeah, those were good times. Those were good times.
Speaking of good times, what do you think have been some of the best times that you can remember from New York? So, like, if somebody was to ask you about your best memories of your home state and everything and your home city, what are some of your best memories? And what are some of the misconceptions you think people have of the city and particularly of Spanish Harlem? Because I've actually known at least one or two other people from Spanish Harlem as well. So I'd love to hear some of what you feel are the misconceptions of your home area.
Well, I've always got that New Yorkers are rude and we're mean, which is not true. We're just we're just so big we're just too busy making money. It's all a hustle in the city. It's all a hustle, and we're just trying to make that dollar for the day because it's like survival. It's all about survival. They don't call it the concrete jungle for nothing. It's all about survival, and it's all about making that dollar, making that hustle so you can stay afloat. And it's not like we're not rude. I don't know. We're not rude people. I'm we we're I'm a New Yorker, and even sometimes I can't like, okay, why are we so weird? Why are we so weird? I mean, it doesn't take it. It only takes like a second to say hi to somebody, but if I say hi to somebody, they'd be like, "Who are you? Like, do I know you? Can I help you?" It's always a like they're always on the defense. Like, hey, I'm just saying hi. I'm just saying hi. Eh, I don't know. So I just be about my business and just keep it moving. I'm like, well, maybe this person is on their way to work, and I'm just gonna leave them alone. But yeah.
Well, I mean, the other thing that people I always think picture of New York is that New York always has like its own style, its own ability, and there are certain places where you're nothing really catches you off guard. Like if you see something that a lot of places may consider out of the norm, if you're in like say New York, Miami, or in Los Angeles, some of the maybe even Chicago, you're not really going to be caught off guard. So like if a guy I'll just give an example. If a guy walks down the street in Durham, North Carolina, wearing a dress, people's heads are probably going to turn. In New York, not as much. And the same with
It's
Miami,
nothing.
New Orleans, and
Nothing.
places like
Yeah.
that.
Like, oh, okay. All right. They're like, oh, he's naked. Oh, okay.
Right? You don't know whether it's a performance art piece or whatever's going on there. So, like
Yeah.
I said,
Yeah.
there's no telling if you see things going on in New York that other places might be totally caught off guard by and everything. They're in New York. Y'all just kind of like walk by it because I've even seen, clips on YouTube and other places where people are, doing everything from proposing to people and like once partner proposing to the other, and the folks in New York are just walking right by them. Whereas in other cities they're going to stop, gawk, maybe even kind of bait them into doing whatever they're doing. Whereas half the people in New York, when I was watching one of the clips, they just kept on walking. They were going to the restaurant, they were going to work, they were not paying any attention. I want to say that in this particular video, the woman walked away, so it's probably a good thing that they weren't paying attention because I want to say that the person was cold out, rejected, and everything. But definitely, I just think of New York as being a city where y'all just are kind of open to a little bit of whatever happens, happens, and it's not really going to be anything that's overly going to surprise you or anything of that nature. But I've also heard about some New Yorkers that have gotten, bent out of shape when people were not wearing the mask or not doing what they're supposed to do in the stores during the height of the pandemic.
Mhm.
So I guess in that sense, y'all are also very much set in your ways, and whatever that way is, you want that way to be um, encouraged and to be obeyed by those that are following the rules the way that you think that the rules should be followed. Because I do know that there were some people that got upset with folks walking in without the mask and all of that. So I don't know what your observations were of mask wearing. I know here we still have to wear them on mass transit, and they actually say that there's a mass transit shortage of drivers because apparently that's a nationwide trouble and
Mm.
everything. But I was just wondering what you're seeing in terms of people wearing masks and getting out. Because I know I've got a friend of mine who's originally from New York, and he is a musician here, a funk musician, and I know that he's actually looking forward to get up to New York to because he's got a show in Maryland, but the rehearsals will probably be in New York because the majority of the band is in New York. But definitely in past conversations and past shows, we talked about the fact that for a while performers couldn't perform, but now they're getting out there. And I just mentioned the event that I did earlier, and the week before that, I did a festival. So definitely more and more people are getting out. We're seeing the basketball arenas filled with fans and everything. So I just wondering what your thoughts are. Are we being too fast in terms of getting out there, or are you feeling safe getting out there without the mask, just in your own thoughts? And what are your thoughts about your kids? Because I know that the CDC is encouraging kids to go to school this coming fall, and they're not saying that they want them to. I mean, on one hand, they're encouraging them to get vaccinated. On the other hand, they're not saying that they got to have all the precautions in place, meaning the school system doesn't. So that to me sounds a little bit backwards, but that's just me. But I was wondering what your thoughts were as a parent and also as one that's in New York about where we are with the mask and the whole pandemic.
Well, I'm very skeptical of not wearing my mask, especially the death toll we had last year. We lost a lot of New Yorkers last year because of this pandemic. So I am very, very cautious when I go out. Even when I go outside, I put my mask on. When I go out with my children, I have them wear their mask because we live in a city. It's not like it's the country where everything is spread out. Everything is closed in. So you're pretty much you're pretty much still prone to this to COVID
Right.
because everything is so closed in. So I stress to my children to always wear their mask when they go outside. When they go
Right.
out, when they go outside, not just when they go into an establishment, but when they go outside. And I have my reservations about the vaccination, but I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna let them get vaccinated. I'm not gonna get vaccinated because I'm still iffy about the vaccination because I've heard horror stories about the vaccination as well,
Right.
where people had side effects from the vaccination, people died from the vaccination. I'm like, I don't know. So I feel like I'm more safer with the mask.
No, I understand that and definitely can understand that concern and everything. What are your thoughts about getting out? Because I can't remember. I know you mentioned that the book started when you were in that dating phase, and I don't know where your social life is at this particular point, but where are you at in terms of like going to restaurants and in terms of going to nightclubs and movies and bars, which are also opening up as well? Or are you actually feeling that if you go out to those, they need to be in a mask as well? And, if you were to go to a Mets game or a Yankees game, depending on which baseball team you follow, that you would want to be one of the fans with a mask. Because I know when I was
Uh
watching the NBA games, I did see some with masks, but then I saw a whole lot without.
huh. I have my reservations of going to it. See, I'm a Yankee fan. I love the Yanks, but I cannot see myself going to Yankee Stadium. If I want to look at a game, I'll look at it on my TV. So I'm good with that.
So you just catch it on the game and everything. And so I'm imagining that now, which side? Because I always hear different sides. I hear that if you're a Yankees fan, then you're supposed to be. I forget what it is because it's Yankees and Mets, and whoever one is supposed to be for one team, and the other is supposed to be for the other. I think the Yankees and the Giants are supposed to be associated, and the Mets and the Jets, or something like that. So how do you
Yeah,
fall on the football side?
yeah. It's like that. You're supposed it's an unwritten rule, but nobody follows it. But for me, I was a Jets fan, not anymore. So I'm with the Giants now. So I'm a Yankees and Giants fan. Um, if you're like on the Queen side, if you like live in Westchester County, you're so for the Mets and stuff
Right.
because like you got City Stadium, that's where the Mets play.
Uh huh.
So you're like you're on that side. But like if you're like on the side where the Brooklyn, Bronx and Manhattan, then you're with the Yankees.
and I know my friend told me this, the guy that I told you is a funk musician and everything, but I'm very confused as what it's supposed to be in terms of basketball because I know y'all have the Brooklyn and y'all also have the Knicks. So fortunately, I don't have to worry about that because I root for players based on my alma mater. So therefore, I am rooting. Well, I don't really have a team in this finals, even though Jay Crowder did go to Marquette. But I with Milwaukee, Marquette is in the Milwaukee, so I can get either way. But before that, I was rooting for Philly, and before that, the Clippers because I did go to school with Doc Rivers. So I kind of follow wherever Doc Rivers goes that I root for that particular team and everything, just because we went to college together. But I'm very confused as to where you're supposed to be when you're in New York, as to whether you're supposed to be a Brooklyn fan or a Knicks fan. But I guess that also falls on which borough you're in. So where does Spanish Harlem fall in that category?
Well, here's the thing. Like I said, it's an unwritten rule. Nobody follows that rule because it's so stupid. But it just boils down to who you like. I personally, I'm not into basketball like that. I do football and baseball. That's my go-to. But it's like an unwritten rule. Like I said, New Yorkers are weird. I'm just I'm just saying, New Yorkers are weird because sometimes some people are like in competition with each other as far as the borough is concerned. Like, I'm the we the best borough. No, we're the best borough. No, we're the best borough. Like, enough. It's so dumb. And then another thing that's what's so dumb is that anyone from the city, like, if you live outside the city, like New York State, we call it New York State. Like, if you live in Poughkeepsie, was it Poughkeepsie or Binghamton or Peekskill or anything like that, then you're not a real New Yorker, which is nonsense because they are New Yorkers. They just don't live in the city. So they call New York State Nowheresville, which is kind of dumb. Be- and I'm like, and when somebody says that, it's personal to me because I have people who live in Ithaca, New York,
Mm-hmm.
and you know and he's a DJ. So, and when, like, when somebody says that, it's like it hits close to home. It hits too close to home. So it's like, enough with the I'm better than you, I'm better than you, I'm better than you. We're all the same people. So
That no, that makes a lot of sense. What is your thoughts? Because that's the other time that New York comes into conversation is when people think about both the theater district and the great Broadway. But I actually had a friend of mine that, until he passed away, was involved in off Broadway, and he was actually one of the original black characters on Star Trek. So you can actually look up Garland
oh,
Thompson
nice.
Jr. and he actually played a role in that. His son is still involved in the theater, I think between California and New York, even though California is more Garland Jr.'s home base and everything. But Garland Thompson Sr. played like I think he was in 3 or 4 of the very early episodes of Star Trek, and definitely was one of the few black characters in that particular sci-fi and everything. But we hear about the theater district, and of course, when people think about New York, they think about definitely some jazz, and there are some great blues artists out of New York, and of course, hip hop. Pretty much, well, it depends on which side you want to believe, but it either most people say that it started in New York, even though the California people would argue that they might have started at around the same time. But I'm actually buying the argument that hip hop started in New York among those DJs and all of that, and definitely
Hmm.
funk music has, it's more of a Detroit sound, but it definitely has some New York roots as well and everything. But definitely it's got some strong New York roots. So, just what are your thoughts about the music scene and the cultural scene that exists in your city as well?
Okay, so I'm gonna show my age now. I'm 41 years old. Okay. And I was and I have to say, hip hop was originated in New York. It all started with the DJs on their turntables and how they mixed the records and whatnot. Rapper's Delight, which was what, 1979. That was like a
Yeah,
year after I was born. So yeah, it started with Rapper's Delight. And then you had Run DMC. Then you had
Right.
Big Daddy Kane, Kool Moe Dee, MC Light, Salt and Pepper. I I I I lived through that. I grew up listening to their music, and it was and I love the music. It was awesome. But then but then it all changed when the 90s hit, and it
Mhm.
was like, I don't want to listen to this anymore, because you had profanity, you had, like, that would get, now you're getting a little bit more raunchy, then they like adding violence to it, and it was like, I mean, I'm just talking for me.
Right.
It just wasn't fun anymore, and it just wasn't informative anymore. I didn't want to listen to it anymore, because just wasn't right rapping about anything. And I was looking at Unsung the other day, and they had Kumo D, and Kumo D said something like, "Did we fail the younger generation? Did we fail them?" And I'm saying to myself, no, I don't think you failed them. They just wanted to, like, they they thought that, oh, this is played out, this is whack. We're gonna do it this way, and you know, it's just I don't know.
No,
That's just me.
no, I hear you because Big Daddy Kane actually has moved down here, and of course we got like Play living down here as well. That being Play Chris Martin from Kid and Play, but definitely he has lived down here and taught down here along with Ninth Wonder, even though Ninth is going to be teaching up there as well. But definitely, I remember going to bars and seeing Big Daddy Kane literally in the bar just chilling and hanging out. And I want to say he was trying to start a record label or production company here in this area. Now, how far that's gotten and whether it's actually still in the works, that I have not heard from my sources as to where they are in that regards. But I do know he was trying to do it. And I know a lot of these folks, I'm not sure about Kane, but I know definitely Play and a couple of others were trying to go more like I won't say Christian, but more of the spiritual kind of things, and more like straight, not even straight ahead, but more of a pure, less raunchy kind of style of music and all of that. So, like I said, they're trying some different thing, including having maybe even some Christian bass in some of their music as well. So it'll be interesting to see what some of the old guard does. But I do know at least a few of the old guard from New York have moved down to this part of the country as well. So and some have probably even moved further south, like around Georgia and Florida and places like that. But definitely, I agree with you that that was going on. What was your kind of view? Because, like I said, I know that, and he's a little bit, he's actually older than I am. Even I think he's in his maybe 60s or something like that. But what was your view of the funk music scene? Because I know that that was a big scene in New York as well. Or did you even get into that at all?
Um, well, I grew up listening to hip hop and R&B, and and Spanish music, salsa, merengue, and bachata. Well, bachata is more, merengue and bachata is more Dominican,
Right.
but whatever. But when I was growing up, I could remember listening to Kiss FM and WBLS and Hot 97. When playing on the radio at my grandmother's house. Um, so that's what I grew up on. And whenever I went to the store, I heard Spanish music playing. So that was the only time I heard it until I got older, and I was listening to more Spanish music. La Nueva Mega. That was my go-to music. That was my go-to. That's my go-to music station for Spanish music, and as well as others. I listen to Spanish music in Florida, Spanish music stations in Texas and California. Um, what else? What else? What else? What else? Oh, and I also listen to KTU, and they play Latin freestyle music. I love Latin freestyle music. Let me name some: Expose, TKA,
Mhm.
Judy Torres. I love listening to them.
Wow.
Um, so that's what I grew up on.
Gotcha. What do you think about? Because this is an argument I've had with several people, just in terms of conversations. But I sometimes get aggravated when folks want to put people all in one category, like they want to think that all Latin people vote the same way, think the same way, and all of that. When we know that there are vastly different styles of Latin music and just Latin culture. The Puerto Ricans are not always going to think the same as the Mexicans or the Dominican Republicans or those folks from Brazil, the Brazilians, or even the Costa Ricans and a number of other Latin and Central American countries. And I guess we could say the same thing about the Asian population and to some degree the African American population. But I do sometimes get aggravated when people try to put us all in one lumped group. So I just wondering, even growing up and when you're talking to your kids, what are your thoughts about even that conversation of us, one, celebrating our heritage, but at the same time not feeling like we're all the same? Because I know even in the festival world, sometimes they'll say that they want to get some Latin music involved, and they'll pick one good Latin band, maybe somebody from Brazil or somebody from you know, I'm trying to think of another popular band, but somebody from Brazil or Puerto Rico, or they might get a Mexican band. But once they pick that one band, then they feel that they've done their due diligence of getting Latin music represented, even though even here in North Carolina, there are different styles of Latin people. So, they just because you pick a salsa band doesn't mean everybody loves salsa or merengue. There might be some people that like that more Mexican style of like I forget what they call it, Tex-Mex or something like that. So, but they feel that yeah, I've given them their one representation, and the same thing with the Asian population in the festival market. And I'm going like, no, we probably need to give them at least 2 or 3 slots, but that's just me.
Well, I do agree. It's very annoying how you put black people with black people and Hispanic people with Hispanic people. Enough with the labels, enough with the categorizing. Everyone is mixed with anything. Like me, myself, I know there's some people who see me, oh, you're a black woman. No, I'm not a black woman. Yes, I have black features, but I'm not all black. I'm West Indian. I'm Danish. I'm what else? I've even found out I have Middle Eastern roots. And I consider my and whenever I have a questionnaire and I see race, I don't put black. I mean, unless that's the only option, but I put more than one race because I am more than one race. I'm not just black. Because I am more than one race. And then that's another thing. There are some people who are more than one race as well. Um, my daughter, she's black and white.
Mm-hmm.
My son, he would be considered black, but he's like his mom. He's mixed as well. He's just dark skinned. Um, what else? Yeah, it's annoying, and Puerto Ricans are different from Dominicans, and they as for the Latin population, they're all different. In fact,
Right.
their whole even though they all speak Spanish, the dialect is totally different. Like the way a Dominican speaks is different from a Colombian.
Right.
Totally different, and the way a Colombian speaks is different from a Mexican. Totally different.
No,
Um, go on.
No, see, I agree with you. Definitely, and you hear those different styles and everything, and folks are sitting there acting as if it's all supposed to be homogenous and all of that. But we know that there are different cultures and even different attitudes and everything. Because, like I said, I know that there are some very conservative people out of the Latin American population. I think about some of those Cubans that are down there in Florida. But then there are also super liberals like AOC. So, like I said, there's all even you can't even lump them together politically as well.
hmm it's annoying. It's annoying. I'm like, enough with the labels, enough with the grouping of the people. Enough. Like, when is this gonna be over? When are we gonna stop? Categorizing each other like based on our skin color and our culture and our cultural background, and our race. Enough with this, because at the end of the day, we are all look, as Americans, we are made up of different ingredients that make up our unique American flavor.
Right.
Okay, we are all different, but we're all beautiful people. You know, I mean,
Right.
like I said, I embrace my West Indian roots, and I embrace my Middle Eastern roots. In fact, I'm learning to look at TV from Pakistan, from like countries from Pakistan, and it's really interesting. I'm like, wow, this is really interesting. So it's so yeah, I think people should be more open minded and stop and enough with the labels.
No, I agree with you. Enough of the labels and everything. Coming back to the authorship and the books and everything, what advice? Well, actually, I had a couple of questions, but what advice would you give to folks that just want to write books in general, that are thinking that they got that great book I had mentioned that at the beginning and everything, that everybody claims that they have that great novel in them? But what advice would you give to folks that think that they have that great novel and want to do what you have done, which is publish it? So, what advice would you give them as to a way to get past their um, block? Because a lot of times people have a mental block. They might have the greatest book idea in the world, but they feel like they can't do it for whatever reason. So, what advice would you give to people to actually get into that writing space?
Number one, write what you know.
Okay.
That is the number one. Write what you know. Number two, do not force an idea to come, but I let the idea come to you. And when it does, write it down. Because if you're like me, you'll forget it. So it's best that you write it down somewhere. If you have a book, I have like 4 books. I have 4 writing books. Whatever idea I have, I write it down in my book. Or if I don't have a book, I put it in my notes in my phone. So whatever, and then like whenever you go back to your notes, um and if you're able to add something or develop that idea, develop it, and it'll come, and pretty soon you'll have a chapter, and then it'll have another chapter, and then another, and then another, and then another. But yes, the number one rule is write what you know. Always write what you know. But at the same time, when you write what you know, don't write it entirely true. Like, fudge it a little bit to make it a little bit more fiction. And I say this because I was looking at the movie called The Crush. I don't know if you remember The Crush.
Yeah.
Um okay, so the person who came up with the story, his name is Alan Shapiro. And I was looking, and I've looked at this movie, and I'm like, you know what? They changed the name of the villain. Her name was Darian in the when it first came out, and then they changed it to Adrian. So I'm like, now why did they do that? So I googled it, and that's when they said, well, the real life person who um who did all this, who was the villain, her real name was Darian. So I guess they didn't want to give her any credit, because she was such a she was a bad person. So they
Right.
changed it to Adrian. And I guess like other stuff was more made it a little bit more fiction, but yes, this was based on what really happened to Alan Shapiro.
Oh, well.
So yeah, yeah. This is what really happened to Alan Shapiro, and his wife suggested, hey, why don't you like make a movie out of this? So
Wow.
write what you know, but be fictional about it. You know.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Now, the other thing, and it actually was somewhat related, but everybody feels that they have those stories that they want to share that are a little bit on the, for lack of a better term, blue side and things of that nature and everything. So, how would you encourage people to actually go into that space of writing as well? Because a lot of people will imagine that they have stories based on their own life experiences in terms of relationships, or just their desires and dreams and everything. But a lot of people don't necessarily want to write blue material, even though I'm a fan of blue. I've actually got Erica Jong's Fear of Flying, and I used to have some Zane books, but in the process of moving from point A to point B, Zane disappeared. So I will probably at some point get some more Zane books. So I'm not afraid of erotica books, but a lot of folks are and don't even like to acknowledge that they have them in their bookshelves and everything. So how would you encourage people to write those kind of stories if they have those kind of stories in their mind? And I'm not saying that everybody has to write an erotica book.
Well, I will say that, I've met a lot of authors that write erotica books. So far I've met writers who wrote about, the alpha male and the billionaire, like 50, like it seems to me they're taking a page from the 50 Shades of Grey, and they want to like do that, and that's cool, that's fine. Um, but I from my perspective, you just gotta be careful how you present it. Don't be too raunchy about it. Like with 50 Shades of Grey, it was sophisticated, and it was clean, and it was, well, not clean, but it was sophisticated, and I guess it was tasteful.
Right.
Um, but if you're writing a book about it, I mean, to me, I think sky's the limit. If you want to write a book about it, it's, sky's the limit. You know, you know, I'm very colorful in my language, and I'm very, you know, yeah, I'm very colorful in my language, and I want the person to actually feel and see what's going on. But with me, I make sure I put a disclaimer like, okay, what you're about to read is very racy. So if you don't want to read this book, close the book and put it back. You know what I'm saying? So yes, I put a disclaimer. I put a disclaimer on in my book on the Pink Foxhole, because I'm like, look, this is some very rich. This might, the content might be too rich for your blood. So, fair warning, you know.
Now
But
that
yeah,
makes
I
a lot.
think if you want to write an erotica, go for it. Go for it.
And the other thing is, I know that there was a time that you would go down to like department stores and you would see the Christian bookstores, and they used to be, somewhat popular, maybe not as popular as a Barnes and Noble or some of the other bookstores and things of that nature. But I'm not sure that there's been enough books written in that Christian authorship space as well. And the trilogy is in that space. So do you feel that there's been enough books written within that space as well? Or would you like to see more books that have kind of that Christian mindset? Because like I said, I know that even at your more popular bookstores, there are, Christian sections and things of that nature. But then there are entire bookstores that are nothing but Christian books. And I know that there used to be one at one of our local malls that I would see on occasion. But I sometimes wonder if there's enough people. I mean, of course, the Bible is considered one of the greatest books of all times and everything, or definitely the greatest book of all times. But definitely, I was just wondering, do you feel that there's enough writing within the Christian space as well? Because the trilogy falls within that space.
I don't think there's enough books written from a Christian I don't think there's enough Christian books written. I think I think it depends. I think it's because of the mindset of the world today.
Mm-hmm.
People want to read about drama and love triangles and bondage, and taboo stuff. People want to read about the taboo stuff. They don't want to read about the Christian stuff, like people trying to do the right thing, and you know trying to do the right thing, even though they're always tempted by the wrong thing. And that's what Chalice, the Book of Life, is all about. You have these people that are trying to live their life righteously, but they're constantly being tempted to do the wrong thing. And these are not good. These are not bad people. These are not good people. They are people who, they are just regular people like me and you. and they deal with these decisions that they make. Like they deal with whether they should do this decision or do that decision. They deal with consequential thinking. So and that's and furthermore, the reason why this is considered, you know, I wouldn't, well, it could be considered a Christian book because, you know, the people go to a Catholic college, and they are Christians, and they have the church, and like I said, they try to do the right thing. They want to do the right thing, but it's like, you know, they're constantly tested. Life is constantly testing them whether they want to do the right thing, or they want to do the wrong thing. I mean,
Uh,
you have one character, that finds a baby. He found a baby in a park, and um and he felt and he just instantly fell in love with this baby, and he took the baby home, and the mother said, what are you doing with this baby? Where does this baby come from? So the he says, well, I found the baby, and I want to take care of her. And the mom was like, no, you can't. You cannot take care of this baby. Like, what if somebody just, like, you can't just, take a baby, take home a random baby off the street. So she says, we have to take this baby to the orphanage. And the guy's heart is heartbroken because he doesn't want to give this baby up. So it's like, either you keep the baby and have the police come after you because now you're considered a kidnapper, or take it to the orphanage and, you know get over and suffer this heartbreak of losing this baby that you fell in love with. So you have stuff like that. You have, decisions like that. The characters in my book deal with.
Yeah, and that's interesting because I actually had a conversation with one of our other guests and everything who had actually written a book about Christianity and divorce, and I've had a couple of conversations just in that space and everything, and we've been talking about how, in my mind, and I'd love to hear your thoughts, there are some dual standards that exist, even in the way that we treat men and women in the church. Because as I was saying, I've known some churches that are a little bit uh, open toward like the guy going and shopping around. They might not want him to be like, uh, overly dramatic in that and everything, but they basically are saying that the guys can shop around, and they're telling the women to be pure as driven snow. And also, I've got some issues with the ways that certain churches deal with divorce and act as if it's like one of the worst sins of all times and everything. Because I've had some friends that have been divorced in the church and oftentimes don't get the kind of support that they should get. And then you also have some churches that will promise to help the poor and help the folks in need, but then when the folks in need go to them, they almost shun them or disappear from them and everything. So I'm not saying that all churches are that way, and I'm not saying that it's even like a trend, but I have seen that in certain places where it's kind of like gives you this worried feeling about what's going on with church leadership, not so much the church itself, but church leadership. So I don't know if you've got any thoughts about that based on your own church going experiences or even your own relationship experiences. But I do sometimes feel that there are certain double standards that exist and are put out there by the church structure, which unfortunately also has a lot of racial bias as well.
Um, I don't fully, um, I don't fully, rely on the church,
Right.
um, because of the way, you look to a priest for guidance, right?
Hmm.
And and but the or any other man of the cloth, but they'll look to you and say, they'll 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 they'll, they'll see it from a spiritual standpoint, and you're listening to them, and you're like, you know what, this person just doesn't get it. This doesn't get it. Like for example, my boyfriend, he's a like I said, he's a God fearing man. And I told him, I said, um I spoke to my mother's longtime friend, and she asked me if I reached out to my mother on her birthday, and I said no. And she said, "Why not?" I said, "Because she's toxic." um she I mean, if this is a woman who believes that kindness is a form of weakness, so if I show her this form of kindness, she'll think of me as weak. Like what I did was weak, and I'm like, I'm not doing that. I'm not going to text her happy birthday. And people, and she could not understand. Like, it's like this is such a simple thing. Why would she believe that? Like you wishing her a happy birthday is a form of weakness, and she just did not get it. I said, you don't get it. And when I told my boyfriend this, he said, the Bible says, blessed be the peacemaker. I'm not being I'm like, I'm not showing any kind of I, I mean, I'm not being I'm keeping the peace. I'm keeping the peace by not showing any kind of kindness, because this is a person who does not who values kindness as a form of weakness. So I haven't texted her anything nasty. I haven't called her and said anything nasty to her. I'm keeping the peace by staying away from her. That's how I keep the peace, and that's how I keep my peace. So, I think if when you talk to a priest or a deacon or a minister or a pastor, it's like they mean well, but I don't think they really understand, because they have not experienced something like that,
You know, I
or what
definitely
you're going through, you know.
a lot of times they haven't gone through those kind of situations, and they're going based on some of their life situations, which in some cases might be similar, but in some cases they don't have any clue as to what the average citizen has gone through and all of that. So I definitely agree that sometimes they need to put themselves in it, check, and actually kind of study the situations. Like I said, I've even seen some folks that have condemned those folks that have gotten divorced, and I know different religions and different denominations have different views on divorce, but I'm going like, there are some cases where I think divorce is perfectly fine, and I don't think that anybody would want like people to stay in abusive situations or in situations that are like that. But you do have some folks that will encourage people to stay in what are beyond repair situations in my mind.
Absolutely. And some of these marriages, you know, it's pretty bad. I've met certain people who are old school Catholics, and they've been with these abusive men for 50 years. Why? Because the church says that they can't get a divorce. Well, it's either what's important, your marriage, or I mean, what's important, you obeying the church, who has no clue about your home life,
Right.
or your life and your children. What's more important? The church or your life? What's more important? And I'm going to always choose my life, because at the end of the day, the church doesn't know my children, what me and my children go through. And the church isn't there to witness what my children and I go through. So, I mean, if the church wants to doesn't want to does wants to denounce me, fine. But I'm going to choose my life and my children all the time, because I'm going to get away from this monster. He's not going to kill me.
No, that makes a lot of sense and everything. What do you think are some of the goals that you've got set for yourself in terms of particularly in terms of the authorship and the books, as to where you would like to be, say, 5 years from now? Do you see these books and that you've already created, both the erotica one as well as the trilogy, being turned into movies or TV series, or do you have other books in your mind that you would like to get out in the next 5 to 10 years? And if so, are they still in this same kind of style of book, meaning that in one case it's a collection of erotica stories, in the other case it's a trilogy with a lot of different narratives and different side stories and everything? But where do you see the publisher journey going in, say, the next 5 to 10 years?
Um, okay, so I am writing more books. Um, I'm gonna finish my trilogy. I have a sister book for the pink other Pink Foxhole called Pink Foxhole Lost Chronicles, and that's more towards the historical side of erotica. I also have a book called Are the Kids All Right? And that's pertaining to childhood trauma.
Okay.
And I have some other and I would like to work on other books. Now, I've always wanted my trilogy to be a TV series. Absolutely. Absolutely. I want my trauma my trilogy to be a TV series. Maybe on NBC, maybe on FX, I don't know. Whatever television station, but I definitely want it to be on TV because I think it's important for people to see and understand different aspects. Different people from different cultures go through everyday problems just like everybody else. It doesn't matter what their race is. It doesn't matter what their gender is or what have you. At the end of the day, we go through the same problems. It may be a little different from others, but it's still the same problem. Like you have like one of my characters, he has to choose whether he wants to marry a girl he never that he was set to marry, or or be with a girl that he fell in love with, who is outside of his race and outside of his culture.
Mm.
So he has to make that decision. And then you have the owner. Then you have this entrepreneur and his wife, and they have two small children, and he wants to set up an establishment, but the only place that he can afford it is in the quote unquote forbidden part of the city, which is the Rainbow Quarter. So it's either he takes this dive or he doesn't. So like I said before, you have people from different walks of life, different cultures, different races, going through these hard decisions just like everybody else.
I hear you. Now, when you said the historical part, I was coming back to your other two books, The Pink Foxhole, the historical part, and everything. What are we talking about? We're talking about like a study of erotica because erotica has been around forever, and I judged a movie competition. I've actually judged a couple of movie competitions, but I've judged Nevermore twice, which was kind of mysteries and thrillers. And then some friends of mine encouraged me because they wanted different styles of judges, including some of us from the heterosexual community, to judge a LGBT movie festival. So I judged that, and one of the movies was about the transsexual community, and it actually showed how transsexuality has been in society forever as well, because actually apparently Joan of Arc and a number of other people were involved in what we now consider transsexuality and everything. But I was just wondering, what did you mean by the historical element?
Okay, so right now, I just finished one of my short stories from my latest book, the Pink Fox Whole Lost Chronicles, and
Mm-hmm.
the first short story is called Bring Her Tulips. Bring Her Tulips is about these it takes place in the Regency era, and
Mm-hmm.
but people know it as the Pride and Prejudice era.
Right.
Um, so it's about these two girls, these two young ladies, and they're at this party where they're looking for a husband. They're put out to find a husband and stuff like that, and they're like, and they end up falling for each other, which is a no-no.
Right.
So what they do is they see each other in secret, and the one of the young ladies, tells the other young lady, look, I still, even though, I'm set to be married to this guy, but I still want to see you. So the other girl is like, okay, that's fine. As long as I know you love me and you don't love him, I don't care. I want to, we can still do this. But then one day, the married woman tells her girlfriend, I can't be with you anymore. I can't run away with you because I'm pregnant. I'm pregnant with his baby.
Right.
So that's like the end of their relationship right there. She like the girl is heartbroken. It's a very nasty breakup at that scene, but turns out it was all a dream. And the one that is married, her and her husband is going to a wedding, but the shocker is the bride is the same woman she had a dream with, that she had a dream about.
Wow.
So yeah, so eventually the two women go outside, in a secluded place to talk, and turns out that the bride remembers the married woman from the ball, and that's it from there. Like you see there's something there, and you wonder, okay, are they gonna go through this relationship, or are they gonna see each other secretly, or are they gonna stay friends, stuff like that. So with Lost Chronicles, I write about three different eras. One is the Regency era, the one is the 1920s, and the other one is 1960s to 1980s. Now, the Regency era is considered the era of sexual discovery.
Hmm.
The second one is the 1920s is the era of sexual expression,
Right.
and the 1960s to the 1980s is the era of sexual freedom. So I
Right.
tackle those three eras in my book.
Oh wow. Well, those are going to be some fascinating eras, and definitely those were eras that had that kind of reputation and everything. And definitely, I
Mhm.
like the dream sequence because that reminds me of the early soap opera, or the early nighttime soap opera Dallas, when they had that famous scene that it was all a dream after the
Yeah.
shooting, and we couldn't figure out what had happened to Jr. and it all turned out to be a dream. And in that case, I don't know that
No,
I
that was
like
Bobby.
that
That
was
was
Bobby. Right?
Bobby.
That was Bobby. That's right, Bobby. Right. But I don't know that I like that ending. But I'm sure it works better in your book and everything. But definitely, dream sequences can be fascinating, and definitely they can add a lot of interesting concepts into what people are thinking and all of that. So definitely, I like that concept of the dream sequence, and definitely that kind of era examination, because even now we're seeing changes in the way that we think about people. Because I remember there was a time, and this was uh I would argue probably closer to like my dad's era, and probably definitely my granddad's era and everything, where interracial relationships were, scorned and definitely thought to be like one of the worst things that could ever happen. And churches were preaching against that. And then there was that era where folks were not going to like women being in relationships together. But we seem to have gotten away from that and everything. And people seem to be more accepting of lesbian and gay couples and things along that line. So it's interesting watching how society progresses, and sometimes it regresses as well. But definitely, it seems like there's been a lot of progress, and I've even had conversations with friends of mine that we feel that this new generation, the ones that are kind of your parent, I mean, not your parents, your kids' generation, and maybe a few years older, is one of the most enlightened generations out there. Now, they do get caught up in the like culture, meaning that they want to be liked on Facebook and social media and all of that. But in terms of being open to a lot of different views, it seems to be one of the most open generations, I would argue, of all times, but definitely in the last
Mhm.
5 to 6 generations. But what are your thoughts on that? Do you feel that this is a more, for lack of a better term, and I know that young people like to use this term, a more awoke generation?
I believe so. Yeah, I do believe so. Compared to how, even compared to my generation, I'm Generation X.
Right,
They're more open. Like, for example, I will say, the case of the Menendez brothers.
right,
Um, See, at that time, we closed the book like, look, they killed their parents, they're guilty, and they need to spend the rest of their life in prison. Now you got people looking at the case in new eyes. They're like, wait a minute, like, let's not close the book on these guys yet. Like, you know, they there's proof where there was sexual abuse.
Mm.
There was sexual abuse with these two boys, and they're saying, we really need to look into this because this wasn't cool. And it's not like, and then you have receipts. You had the cousin saying that he told him about it. You had the aunt that said, look, the aunt said so, but the mother was in denial. And so people, so my children's generation is looking at it from a whole new set of eyes. Like, let's not close the book on these guys yet. We need to give them another chance, give them another appeal. So yeah, I do think that this new generation is more awoke to the past events that we went through, you know, with
No,
the
yeah,
cases
definitely.
from our generation, before they were born.
Right. No, I definitely agree with you on that. What has been your conversation, or have you had any conversation with them speaking about folks that were heading in one direction and now apparently evidence is going in the other direction about Bill Cosby? Because you mentioned some of the other famous sex cases that are still out there and that look like they will be found guilty and everything, like Epstein and a number of others. But everybody was saying that Bill did do the kind of like trickery way of these relationships, but there were other people that were complaining about these women coming to his place at late night hours and things along those lines, similar to what they said with some of the basketball players like Kobe Bryant and others when
Mhm.
Kobe was living and all of that. But definitely, what are some of your thoughts and your friends' thoughts about what just happened recently with Bill Cosby basically being let out, and it doesn't look like because of double jeopardy that anything further can happen. And plus, he's getting way up there in age. So, do you feel that that was justice served or justice unserved?
I think justice was not served. I do not. I look. I don't care what time of night these women came to his house. You don't have no right to take advantage of anybody that way.
Yeah.
All right. If this person is strung out on drugs already and they come to your house, you you know do the right thing, and you're like, look, either you let them in the house or you don't let them in the house. I would let them in the house because I don't want them getting into the wrong, ending up in the wrong hands and getting harmed, or worse, killed. So I would like, so if this person is strung out and high and whatever, I I'm like, look, you need to come inside my house. I'll get you some coffee or whatever, but you know, I'm not giving you any money. I'm not giving you any drugs. You don't take advantage of somebody who is in a state that cannot defend themselves. And I think Bill Cosby took advantage of these women, some of these women who could not, who had no idea of what was going on. Maybe they were strung out, maybe they wasn't strung out, but you know um they you just don't take advantage of women like that. You just don't. That's how. And he took advantage of these women, whether they were strung out or not, or whether what time, whether they came to his house at 3 o'clock in the morning or 2 o'clock in the morning. You just don't take advantage of anybody like that. You don't drug them. You
Yeah.
do not give them drugs. You gave them the drugs. You gave them the drugs instead of saying, look, just sleep on my couch, and we'll deal with it in the morning. But but I'm not giving you no money, and anything like that. So I just think it's not fair, and I'm just really scared, of what what if this happens to R. Kelly? I mean, even though he's got multiple cases in different states, what if this happens to freaking R. Kelly?
Right.
You know, I'm scared. I'm really scared if this happens to R. Kelly. I mean, look what he's done to the Savages. Look what he's done to the Clarys and the Rogers, and a host of other women. You know, it- it's just it's no, it's not right.
Yeah,
It's
because
not right.
Yeah, because it's like that whole legal system just kind of like found a way to get him off based on an irregularity that took place in the court cases and everything. So I guess they were saying that some of the evidence was tainted or wasn't handled correctly and everything. And then that brings up the whole question of double jeopardy, from what I understand. But now we've also got that mess going on, which is a totally different kind of mess. It's not a sexual mess, but still a mess going on with Britney Spears because they felt that she was not in the right state of mind, and therefore there's the whole conversation about transferring her attorney, and I think some of the attorneys have quit and a new attorney wants to come in. And then I've also heard that she might be even processing retiring, all because of the mental health things that she was going through. Just
Mm-hmm.
like there have been concerns about the mental health around Naomi Osaka, the tennis player, and everything. But I have no problem
Yeah,
with our celebrities actually taking time off to get their mental space together. And I know some people may not agree with
absolutely.
me, but I think that mental health is something that we don't talk enough about. And it probably comes down to the other book that you wrote as well, which is that children's book. And I'd love to hear a little bit more about that, and also your thoughts around us dealing with mental health just in general.
Um, so going back to Britney Spears,
Mm-hmm.
um, Britney has been performing since she was a little girl. We're talking about 6 years old.
Right.
I don't know if you've seen I don't know if you've seen clips of her performing on Star Search, but she was on Star Search. Um, then she did the Mickey Mouse Club,
Right.
and she was and then she took a break from being in the spotlight. She went to high school. She was on the basketball team. She was living her life like a normal person. And then next thing you know, she's a singer. Hit me, baby, one more time. And then there was controversy. Then there was controversy about her body. You had like and it was and like you had this one reporter saying was ask her a question about her body. Like, I mean, this is a 17-year-old girl. Like, why would you ask her something like that? Like, what is wrong with you? Like, I mean, it's what? And then you had one reporter ask her if she was a virgin. Like, that is just like you're really like you're come on. You don't ask somebody like that. And then they're like, well, you put on this good girl image, but you have like a vixen side. I'm like, well, do you realize that this is just for stage? Like, do you realize this is not who I really am? Like, I mean, that's what I would have said. Like, this is just for show, people. This is not who I really am. This is just for show.
Right.
But I it's Britney didn't want this. She never wanted to be a performer. She didn't want to be a singer. She never wanted this, but it just took off the way it did. And and her father wasn't even in the picture. It was always her mom. And now her family wants to claim that she's mentally ill. Well, she was under a lot of stress, from the paparazzi. And you had Justin Timberlake, with his male misogyny nonsense. And then you had Diane Sawyer, who I still believe should have apologized to Britney if she hasn't already apologized to her about having that interview with her about, oh, shouldn't you apologize to Justin for what you did. I'm like, first of all, what I did with Justin is none of your business. And why are we talking about Justin? But nobody was. But she. I just think that this singing career just wasn't for her. She was not. She didn't. I don't think her skin was tough enough to deal with that. And now she's in court trying to fight for her life against her father, who thinks she's not mentally safe to take care of herself. I'm like, oh my gosh. I'm like, it's bad, and I feel for her. I really do. I think she should just. It's a very sad story for with Britney Spears. It's very sad, and but at the same time, the silver lining is that she has a very strong fan base, and and they love her, and they're rooting for her, and they're fighting for her, and that's wonderful. She's not alone in this fight. So
Yeah, I
that's a
definitely.
good thing.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you on that and everything. And like I said, a lot of people are also thinking about that uh, trauma aspect and everything. And I know that's part of what your book deals with as well. So I'd love to hear a little bit more about that particular book and just your thoughts about even dealing with trauma as a child.
Um, my book I'm working on is called "Are the Kids All Right?"
Right.
and the title came from a project I was doing in Brooklyn, called from the stoop to the streets. And we have like these different groups, and we sit on these the steps of these different brownstones, and we talk about different issues pertaining to women and stuff like that. Well, not women, but domestic violence, domestic
Right.
abuse, and excuse me. And it was really awesome. It was great. And one and the topic was called "Are the Kids All Right?" So I thought that was a really cool title. So I said, I'm gonna use that title. And so far I talk about um well this one short I talk about uh how I talk about a particular little girl that was killed about 30 years ago by somebody she kind of knew. She knew through her friends. He killed her because I really well, anyway, her name was Jessica Guzman. And we were the same age when she was killed. And I couldn't talk about her because I didn't think people would understand. I could I didn't think people would understand, how this affected me, because it did affect me. This was a little girl who was the same age as me, who went to Catholic school just like me, even though we lived in different boroughs. And I couldn't express my feelings to my friends, and I sure couldn't express this to my family, so I had to deal with it on my own. And that's really tough when you have a problem and you can't tell somebody, so you got to deal with this problem on your own. That is tough, especially when you're a child, and and you don't know what to do, so you have to figure it out, and it's hard. So all I did was, I prayed that, whoever killed this little girl gets caught, and they did. Now they're doing 75 years to life because um they killed two other girls prior to her. So now he's never getting out of jail. And I'm good with that. But I talk about that. I talk about how sad I was, how I how scared I was, how angry I was, and how I had to deal with all these emotions on my own. And yeah, and then I talk about all types of stuff. I talk about, a first love that um that was really hard on me because of the fact that he was always in and out of my life, and it was really hard. And even though we're good friends, it's yeah. But I don't want to get into detail, but you would have to read the book about it.
Yeah, definitely
But
want to
yeah,
read the book and definitely want to read the book. Want people to check out the book. I know one of the things that my friend Nancy talks about, even in what she's dealt with, and of course she was a child when it happened to her as well. And of course she's definitely still encouraging people to deal with that and everything. Is denial, and how sometimes the denial even exists within the family structure and things of that nature. So I'd love to hear your thoughts about that because I do know the denial is very real, and a lot of times people don't even want to acknowledge the abuse that is going on in their family situations and all of that. So I'd love to hear your thoughts about how a lot of times the families don't even they see the signs, or even if they know that things are going on, they stay in that state of denial. So I'd love to hear your thoughts about how the families can sometimes be overly denying of what's going on, because I'm sure that that even came up in y'all's conversations there on the stoop.
Oh, absolutely. Um, the reason why denial comes up is because the truth is so ugly and so nasty and so evil. So what they do is, they don't want to believe that the perpetrator did it. So what they do is they victim blame and they victim shame you and use you as a scapegoat and make you feel bad, make you feel guilty, and now you're gonna have to, like, you know, figure it out, and now you're left with all these feelings and all these emotional psychological scars, and you're trying to figure out, okay, I did okay, like, okay, I'm wrong. Okay, I'm wrong, and how do I make it right? Do maybe I should apologize to this person because I did something to make him or her do that to me. That's what they put in their head. That's what they put in the child's head. They did something wrong, and now they gonna have to now they have to figure out how to apologize to this person because they did something to bring on this perversion out of them. And it sounds so warped and so twisted. I'm like, you gotta be kidding me. The adult is the one that should know better not to touch the child. It's the adult's fault, not the child's fault, because the child doesn't have the isn't you know psychologically developed to more develop is not as developed psychologically as the adult. They don't have they don't their brain capacity or their psycho or their how come I'm using the wrong words. Their, I guess you could say, their brain capacity is not like an adult. And that's what some of these adults fail to understand. A child's mindset is different from it's different from an adult's mindset, because children are children. Children think like children, and they don't think like adults. There are some adults that think children are small adults. No, no, they're not.
Right.
No, they're not. And it's mind boggling. Like, are you like, and Andrea Kelly, who is R. Kelly's ex-wife, she puts this so eloquently. She says, you know what? Instead of inviting Uncle whoever to the cookout and then telling the child stay away from Uncle whoever, how about not inviting him at all? Because what you're doing, you're welcoming the snake into the den. You're welcoming the wolf into the chicken coop. And that's what you don't want. You don't want a predator, uh, um you don't want a predator in your presence.
Right.
You want to keep your child safe. If you want to keep your child safe, don't invite Uncle whoever,
Right.
because he's not gonna stop. He's not gonna stop.
That is so true. And oftentimes folks don't want to think about that, or they also don't want to deal with even the other aspects. And I alluded to that before, and I'd love to hear your thoughts about how sometimes the abuse isn't always physical abuse, but there's also a lot of mental and emotional abuse that can happen in relationships as well. And like I said, I've been involved in relationships that probably folks would argue that they were more emotional or mental. I remember one time, even as a young man, after having been in one of those relationships, literally hanging out with my mom, who was probably close to my age now at that time. So meaning she was in her 50s and I was probably in my 30s or 40s, and literally looking down at the gravel and everything, because they had done a serious mental number to me and everything. So I just wondered if you could talk a little bit about that aspect of what can go on in abuse as well, because sometimes it's not just the physical beating, it can also be things that go on in that mental and emotional space.
Oh, well, I can tell you this, that abuse is a gradual thing.
Mhm.
Um, it starts off with the verbal abuse. It starts with the mental breakdown.
Right.
Um, and then it ventures to other types of abuse like financial abuse,
Hmm.
sexual abuse. And then it gets to physical abuse. It's like chopping down a tree. Like it starts with one chop, and then you chop it and chop it and chop it until it gets weaker and weaker and weaker. And that's what happened to me in my relationship with my daughter's father. Now, he thought that he can woo me by telling me he loved me, like in the first meeting we had. I'm like, you love me? You don't love me. I mean, dude, you don't even know me. I'm like, I've known you for like 5 seconds and you love me. I don't love you. I mean, I don't know you. And he got really offended by that. I'm like, well, what do you want me? I'm like, look, I think you're a cool person, but I don't love you. I really don't love you. But in the end, I end up being with this person out of guilt. I didn't love him. I ended up with him out of guilt. And then the next thing I know, I'm pregnant with his baby.
Mm.
And I'm like, oh man. And even and the pregnancy was the pregnancy was it was just it was really hard for me to it was really hard because I was getting sick. Um I we didn't have our own place to live. And when we did, we ended up in a family shelter. And then I was going through postpartum. Um I didn't, I still had the baby weight, and he made it worse by making fun of my weight. He was cheating on me during and after my pregnancy. Um I'm taking care of the baby, and yet I got to take care of him. I mean, and it was just so hard. Like, I don't like, this is a nightmare. This is a nightmare. This is truly a nightmare. I'm like, okay, so I gotta take care of the baby and then feed you. Like, it was a nightmare, and I felt like 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 excuse my language. I'm like, what the fuck?
Right.
Like, what is this life? Like, oh, I get it. You want me to, like, it was like it, looking back on it, it was crazy. It was absolutely crazy. Like, when we go out, it was like I was he was put it was like he was putting on a show for everybody. Like, look at me. I'm the family man. I take care of my family. I have a beautiful wife and a beautiful daughter. Mind you, we were never married. But he's like, but
Wow.
he was an undercover racist. I will say that. And what I mean, he's an undercover racist. He will he will befriend the black people. He will befriend the Hispanic people, and he will speak with the black women and the Hispanic women. Sometimes have their kids, and when he is really good in it, really good in that circle, he feels that he has the right to to ridicule other black and brown people.
Wow.
He thinks he has that right now. Mind you, he's white. He's white with blue eyes and everything, and he feels that, well, because I have black friends and Hispanic friends, I get to clown the other black and Hispanic people. No, you don't. No, you don't. And then furthermore, if you're insulting a black person, you're insulting your daughter because her mother is black. But see, he doesn't care. He didn't care about me.
Wow.
He didn't care about me at all. And then, like, towards the end, he would choke me. Um, he struck me with a hammer. He he had me arrested for the first time in my natural life. I mean, the first time I actually experienced going to court was with him. I've never been to court for anything, but when I was with him, that was the first time I actually ever gone to court. I've been to family court. It was insane, and I was so angry because I'm like, how could he do this to me? How could he put me through all this?
Right.
So, so now, he's somewhere in New Jersey, uh, and I know this because I and I know this because I'm on his I look on his Facebook, because I have to keep an eye on him, because he likes to put stuff about our daughter, saying, um feel sorry for it's like, feel sorry for me because I have a special needs daughter, and she's this and she's that. My daughter does not have special needs. She is 12 years old. She's a well functioning child. And granted, even though he doesn't call her and doesn't have any contact with her, she's fine. But abuse is just, and he's a narcissistic psychopath.
Wow. Yeah, it sounds like you've definitely gone through a lot and everything, and definitely have been dealing with a lot of this craziness and everything. I'm also amazed at, and we've actually got to get ready to wind down because I've got to produce another friend's show shortly and everything, and then I do a audio podcast as well. But I've been fascinated by a lot of folks that have been getting caught up into the whole catfishing scenario as well, because I've even been part
Mhm.
of that, where folks will try to send you these lovely pictures and things of that nature. So that's another form of abuse in my mind as well, because definitely we're seeing more and more of that in society, where folks are tempting folks to get involved in quote unquote relationships, and in some cases even trying to take them away from their money and things of that nature. So I've actually seen folks that have done that, and they do a good job of going play acting and all that. But I actually called one of them out and called their phone. And I'm sorry, if you're supposed to be an attractive Hispanic woman and you sound like a Nigerian, I'm not buying the act anymore. So they actually did
Right,
not sound anything like what they were supposed to be in their profile and everything. Because I remember when I called, I'm like, that does not sound like that woman. That sounds like a dude from
right,
Nigeria. So I was
right.
not buying the
They're good for
story
that.
anymore. Huh?
They're good for that. I mean, in fact, that happened to me. That
Wow.
happened to me, and luckily I'm like, you know what, this don't sound right. So I
Right.
went to the person's profile, and sure enough, this person's from Nigeria. So I just like, I unfriended them, and he's like, well, you unfriended me. That wasn't nice. I said, look, just leave me alone, all right? And
Right.
then he's like, look, I'm from Nigeria, and I'm like this, and I'm like, leave me alone.
Right. Sometimes you just got to spell it out for them and everything. Like I said, I've thoroughly enjoyed our conversation. If folks are interested in learning about the books that you're doing, the amazing work that you're doing, the jewelry, the cooking, and everything, I would love for them to hear about your social media and how they can get in touch with you via social media. And one of the things that we do at the end of all of our shows is we ask people, because it is a global community, any words of advice or positivity that they would like to share with the audience in terms of words of encouragement. So it can be in either order. So you can either tell your social media first and then your words of encouragement, or your words of encouragement and then the social media. But Aja, I have totally enjoyed our conversation, and do know that you are always welcome to come back and share whatever you're doing, because I always love having guests come back whenever they're available and share their wisdom and share their thoughts about a lot of things. Because as you can tell on both this show and the other shows that I do, we love talking about different issues and just getting different people's insights, and also finding out what they are doing in the world of positivity and in the world of making the world a better place. So definitely, if you want to share, like I said, either your ways that people can get the book and your social media outlets and your word of wisdom that you would like to give people and words of encouragement, now is the time to do that.
Sure. Okay, so you can if you would like to get a hold of me, or befriend me or follow me. I'm on Facebook and Instagram. Um, you can add me. I'm Aja Pearl on Facebook. I have I have multiple groups going on, and I'll definitely share. I'll definitely include you in my groups, books. whatever. I'm in a lot of groups. Also on Instagram, you can get a whole, if you are interested, I have 3 Instagrams. Like the first one is Pink Fox 219.
Hmm.
The second one is Carlin and Davika Gems in one word. That's CARLIN, the word and DEVIKAGEMS. All in one word. Carlin and Davika Gems. And the last one is A Jar of Cookies. And that's spelled AJR, no, AJAR underscore of underscore cookies. COOKIES.
Cool. And any words of encouragement or words of wisdom that you want to share? And if I remember correctly, I think you're also on Clubhouse. So if you want to let folks know how they can reach you on that as well and everything, but any words of encouragement and positivity that you would like to share with our global audience?
Absolutely. Um, I just want to say that those who are listening, I thank you for listening to what I have to say. Also, I hope that whatever I say, you take a piece of it and apply to it to your everyday life. Whatever what I suggest, my suggestion is to live your best life. Do not do not pay attention to any of the negative people going you have surrounding you. I had I had people I had negative people surrounding me, and unfortunately that happened to be my family. So if it happens to be family, get rid of them. Toxic people are toxic people, just like a rose is a rose. Toxic people are toxic people. And go, and whatever your passion is, do it in the do it. I'm like stuttering.
Yes, sir.
You always bring your A game. Do it with great intensity. Whatever you're passionate about, it do it in great intensity. Don't care what anybody says. You and and because because it'll come out organically, and it'll come out in its purest form, and it's gonna come out beautiful. And whatever you do, don't ever stop doing it. Whatever passion you have, don't ever stop doing it, because there are gonna be some haters, but you have to watch out for those haters. But the only one that's never ever going to hate you is is God or Allah or whatever your the universe is, whatever whoever you pray to. That greater being is going to always look out for you, and he or she is going to always shine upon you.
No, no doubt about that. Great words of wisdom, great words of encouragement. I want to thank you once again for being a guest and everything. And I'm going to actually close out this particular show with some music from a friend of mine that sent me his music that he had done and was actually a past guest and everything. So I want to close out with their music as a repeat from a show of about a week or two ago. But definitely, Aja, you were an amazing guest. And actually, the show that I'm
Thank
going
you
to have to
very
produce is with another Pearl. So actually, I'm going to wait for
much.
Maxine to come on to her show because she does a show called Life Strategies, and her name is actually Maxine Phillips McCoy, but she goes by the nickname of Pearl because she's always shedding pearls of wisdom and all of that. So I'm going to go from a younger Pearl to an older Pearl because I think that Maxine is like in her 60s or something like that. So I'm going to be leaving from one Pearl to another Pearl while I wait for her to come into the room at about 7 o'clock and see what she'll be sharing. It won't be more of an interview because she actually either does the interview or sometimes just does a talk, so almost like a TED talk. So I will get to hear her give her wisdom while I actually get ready to prepare for other shows that I've got going on in the near future, including my show with Dean that'll happen later on this evening as well. And that's Straight Talk with Dean and Mark that we do on Blog Talk Radio. So still got some other things that I've still got to do today as well as on tomorrow and Wednesday. But you have been a truly amazing guest, and I thoroughly enjoy your spirit and your style and look forward to having you come back on in the very near future.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It's been a wonderful experience, and I cannot wait to be back on your show again.
Sounds great. We're going to close it out with this music. And like I said, we'll see Aja in the very near future. But let's hear a little bit of music to wrap it all up.
Who am I? by Victor Jones. Who am I? That's a good question. First off, I'm not a Republican or Democrat, as if to boast or celebrate either party doing anything great to establish equality for my people since the birth of this Western civilization. So who am I? Not an elk or a mason, and desire not to be part of any so-called organization. But the question still remains, who am I? To define my identity by my last name, which comes from a former slave master, I am a son of a slave. Being freed from slavery, I become a son or a victim of Jim Crow. Abolished from Jim Crow, I became a son of segregation, or should I say a last-class citizen. From the passing of the Civil Rights Act, which overruled segregation, I became a son of incrimination. So who am I? With such a defining question, it becomes very complex to understand who I really am, with all of my history being buried on the shores of West Africa, where it all began. Kush, Ethiopia, Egypt, Ghana. So where do I come from? I didn't get a chance to choose what race, creed, or color I would possess, so here I am today, born a black man in a so-called democracy that continually proves its hypocrisy towards my black nature. A government where the original philosophy, doctrine, and scientific explanation is a downplay of equality for my existence, producing hopelessness and destruction to my identity of who and what I am. The question still remains, who am I?